Sabrina, and this is my review over the Raven Cycle series by Maggie Stiefvater. This is going to be a spoiler-free review, just my general thoughts on the series overall. I did do a separate spoiler-full review of The Raven King, so if you want to hear my spoilery thoughts and details, then check out that book talk. But this is just an overall series review where I want to give you just my general thoughts and feelings in case you haven't started the series yet and want to know what it's about, what's really going on here, is it any good, should I pick it up? I'm also going to be reviewing the audiobooks and talk about the rereadability of the series because I have read it from start to finish twice, and I'm going to be answering some questions that a few of you guys submitted, so that's what this video encompasses. Let's get into it. So this series is a quartet. There are 4 books, and the books in order are The Raven Boys, The Dream Thieves, Blue Lily, Lily Blue, and finally The Raven King. The way that I like to describe this series is that it's about a house of psychics, a group of treasure hunting boys, and an ordinary girl who are all seeking out the tomb of a lost king because legend says if you can find this king's tomb and wake him, he will grant you a favor. And these different groups of people all have different reasons for wanting to wake him and gain his favor, so it really is more of an adventure type vibe. At times I get kind of Tomb Raider-y feelings, although it's not like that at all, but like the whole tomb excavation, exploring stuff kind of gives me vibes like that. The whole legend of the Lost King is Welsh mythology. I'm not sure how close to like real history it really is. Obviously there's a big magical component to this, which is totally fiction, but the only thing that I can really compare it to is like Arthurian legend. So like King Arthur, Camelot, the Knights of the Round Table. If you like Arthurian legend, you will probably enjoy this one too. There is also a paranormal aspect to it because we are dealing with a house of psychics. There are some ghosts. There's a really different magic system, and for me this series is really a standout because I have never read anything like it. I'm not very familiar with Welsh mythology. The magic is totally different. Like, it really is a standout, and I think that's why people so often call this series weird, just because it's unfamiliar. Don't let that scare you off though, because I found the differentness of this series to be extremely refreshing. It took a while for it to grow on me, but once it did, I just found it to be extremely beautiful. The writing is very flowery. There are a lot of metaphors. There is a lot of repetition to get Maggie's points across, but it's not repetition as in I'm so sick of you telling me the same thing, but it just created a beautiful, beautiful rhythm in my opinion. It really just flowed great. I loved it. I also want to talk about the characters, and the characters are what made this series. Blue, Gansey, Ronan, Adam, and Noah. They are the main 5 characters, but there's also a ton of involvement from adult characters in this series. I thought it was an extremely realistic depiction of friendship because these friends fought with each other a lot and they were there for each other a lot when the others were in trouble. So it was just a really great depiction of friendship. There are some straight relationships and a gay relationship within this friend group. There are a couple of characters in the book that get with different people, and there was never a time that they were standing there like, I don't know who my heart's gonna choose. Like, so I didn't feel it to be very love triangle-y. I just felt it to be like a natural progression of relationships within a friend group. The character of Blue is kind of from a lesser well-off family, but she's in with a group of kids from a private school, Gansey and his friends, and Blue just has this hatred towards private school kids at the start of the series, and she thinks I have nothing in common with them, I would never hang out with them, and then she discovers she has some common interests with those boys, and she starts to realize maybe I shouldn't judge them too quickly. As far as a weakness of the series, the biggest weakness that it had for me was the abundance of characters. At times, some of these characters felt like loose ends or like they didn't serve very much purpose in the story at all. We are constantly being introduced to new characters, so I didn't feel like all of them were necessary. However, Maggie writes characters so wonderfully. Like, some of the characters that she comes up with, who would ever think to write a character like that? I just really think she does have skill with it, and it was always enjoyable to get to know these new characters, even if there were a lot of them. As far as if I would recommend this series, I personally would definitely say give it a shot. I really enjoyed it. It was very different, especially if you're looking for something that's a bit more unique. However, I can understand why it's not for everybody because it is weird. It does deal with some unfamiliar things, and perhaps it's a little bit too character driven than what people expect when they get into a book that's about seeking out a lost king. So I did reread the series from start to to finish, and I want to talk about that. I first read each of these books as they were published, and I listened to the audiobooks of the first 3 right before the final book came out because I wanted a refresher, and then when I got the final book, I read the print book and immediately turned around and listened to the audiobook. So the audiobooks are all narrated by Will Patton, and he does a fantastic job with the narration. His voice just has this like misty, eerie quality to it as he's narrating that so fits the tone of this small town and the story that is taking place here. And his voice acting for each character's voices is just great. He really brings them to life. I particularly love the character of Calla. Calla is one of the adult psychics, and she just kind of blends into the background when you read the books, but when you listen to him narrate the audiobooks, Calla stole the show every scene she was in. And also because of the quality of the writing, a lot of the phrases that Maggie writes make a lot of sense when spoken out loud, so he just brought it to life in a totally different way. I want Will Patton to narrate everything I listen to ever because just he's wonderful. 10 out of 10, highly recommend the audiobooks. And then a couple of notes on the rereadability of the series. Maggie definitely knew where the series was going from the start, and there's so much foreshadowing in that first book. I really do think that there is such value in rereading this and picking up on those things because you're going to catch on to things that you didn't know were going to come back around later on. So I definitely do think that there is a high quality of rereadability to the series. And lastly, in this video, I am going to touch on a few questions that I got from a few of you guys wanting to know my thoughts on specific things about this series. I got a couple of questions concerning how hard is it to get into this series, or why do people always say that this series is hard to understand. I think people call this series very weird or difficult to understand just because it does deal with some unfamiliar topics like ley lines and sleeping kings. Like if you're not familiar with that stuff, you might find it a little bit difficult to get into, but the writing isn't like over your head. You're going to be able to understand and comprehend what's actually going on. There's no reason why you wouldn't be able to get into it. I was asked if these books are overwhelmingly paranormal. Some of the paranormal topics that this series deals with are things like tarot card readings, scrying, there's a demon, there are ghosts, there is some possession in it. So if any of those things make you uncomfortable, then you might find it to be overwhelming, but I didn't find it to be overwhelming. I'm not very familiar with any of that stuff at all, but there is so much more to the story as well. I was asked how are the plots of the individual books in comparison to the overall plot. Each individual book does have its own story arc. Each of them have rising action, a climactic scene, and then a conclusion. So each of them did feel very solid on their own in my opinion, but there is still that overarching plot that is going to drive you forward into the next book. It all really does end up tying together. I was also asked about the character of Blue and how did I perceive her, because sometimes she can come off with this attitude of I'm so different, or I can only be friends with boys. I think a lot of times we hear, oh, the Raven boys, it's one girl and a group of boys, but we discredit the fact that Blue lives in a house full of women. Blue definitely does know how to get along with women. She just happens to get caught up in a group of boys, and they're such a strong friend group because they go to an all-boys school. I saw an interview that Maggie did at BEA this past week where she talked about the reason she wanted to write about a female character in a group of guy friends is because Maggie herself has always been interested in hobbies and stuff where it's predominantly a male field. Like she's really interested in sports cars. She just wanted to explore that dynamic because it's something that she had a lot of experience with. There are a couple of times where Blue says that she feels much older than she really is. She does say that she doesn't really fit in at her public school, but she does like hang out with people at her school. They just aren't part of the story. Like there are several references throughout the series of her going to places with these other friends or saying hi to them when she and the boys are out and about. So like she does talk to other people, but she just never really found a place where she fit in until she met Gansey and his group. And I think a big part of that in this story is because Blue lives in a house of psychics and the rest of that town thinks that they are whack. So she kind of has this reputation thrust upon her of being different. I never thought that this was a bad quality to the friend group. I just felt like that's just the story that was being told. And finally, I was asked, is the Raven Cycle series worth getting into considering all of the hype that it has? I think it's worth it. I would recommend giving it a shot if you're interested in any of the things that this series encompasses. So that is it for my non-spoiler series review. If you've read this one, please let me know what you thought about it. Don't forget, if you want to know my detailed thoughts on the Raven King, you can check out that spoiler book talk. If there's anything that I didn't cover that you want to know more information about, definitely ask me down below and I will answer you there. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the comments. Bye!